Hey everyone, welcome back to Intro to DJing. In this video, what I want to do is show you what these different deck controls do. And the idea being, these deck controls are mirrored across all your different decks, so you understand how they work on one deck, and you'll be able to use them on multiple different decks. Now, if you're following along in Virtual DJ, I encourage you to pull up Virtual DJ and make sure you understand where these controls are. And then when this video is over, play around with them so you understand. And if you're using a different DJ program like Serato, Rekordbox, Traktor, something like that, follow along and be sure you understand where these controls are in your DJ application, because very quickly what we're going to be doing is using these controls to do transitions and things like that. So it's very important that you understand where these controls are and what they do so we can start combining them. Consider these to be like your ingredients, and we're putting them together to cook a wonderful meal, or in our case, hopefully some decent transitions between songs. So the most obvious one is going to be your play pause button. Simply starts and stops the track. Most DJ controllers will also have a jog wheel, which you can use to basically fast forward or rewind the track. This is reminiscent of the days when DJs were actually using vinyl or turntables and could use this to push and pull the record back. Although most DJ controllers will have these jog wheels that basically mimic this behavior. The way the jog wheels on most DJs controllers work is the top part is usually capacitive. So if you touch it while the track is playing, it'll stop the track. Whereas if you basically push the rim around forward or backwards, you would have to push along the rim. It'll speed up or slow down the track ever so slightly, which allows you to line it up. So there's a difference between pressing and touching the top and basically moving it around. The next control that I want to talk about is the cue button. And this is very, very confusing to a lot of people getting started. So I want to take some time to explain this. What makes it even more confusing is the fact that sometimes the headphone cue is often also labeled cue. So that can make it even more confusing, but generally the way you can find the difference is cue is the one that's near play, which I'm going to call cue, and then your headphone cue is generally will have a headphone symbol on it. It may say cue with the headphone symbol, but that's going to be closer to your trim knob and your EQ controls. So just be sure you locate them and know the difference. It's very standard to see a layout like this: cue, play, and sync as big buttons generally right in the corners, and then these are more towards the center. So this is kind of mirroring, well, hopefully what you see on your controller. Now, there are two types of cue behavior, which is kind of confusing. There's cue play, where basically when the track is not playing, you press it once and it'll basically set a cue point, and then when you press it again, it'll just start playing the track. Now, I don't like that behavior because I have the play button for that. So what I typically use is what's called cue stop, and this is what most DJ applications will use, but if it's doing the different behavior, be sure you set that in the settings. And what cue stop does is while you hold the down, it'll start playing the track, and when you release it, it'll stop the track and jump it right back to wherever it was. So to give you an example, I'm going to press it once, it's going to set a point, hold it down. As I'm holding it down, it's playing, and then I release it and it jumps back to where that point was. And as a result, you can move it around. And this will allow you to basically find a point in the track that you want to start. You hit the cue button. Then what you can do is hold down the cue button and then press play if you want to continue the track playing from where you cued it. So I'm fine just pressing two buttons at once. I have more than one finger, so I can press them both at the same time. But I know here in Virtual DJ, there is cue mode, where you have cue play or CUP, and this cue hold button. This is kind of a combination of the two. So once again, this is the standard behavior where it's this cue, what I call cue stop, where it jumps and it jumps back. In addition to your up fader, which we talked about in the last video, you also have your tempo fader. Now this tends to be on the edges of your controller, or on controllers like the DJI Rev 1, it's on the top. And the reason it's on the top on controllers like that is it's mimicking battle style DJ controller. So that's when you have turntables that are rotated 90 degrees, where basically the needle is on the top and you have the tempo fader on top on something like your Technics, like your SL1200 Mark IIs, which are like the de facto DJ turntables. Fun fact, I actually have the SL1200 Mark IIIs, which were only made available in Japan, but it just was the ones that I could find and afford at the time. So kind of fun story about that. So the way this works is this will speed up and slow down the track. So to give you an example, And typically there'll be some button that you can click or double click that'll reset the tempo to its natural tempo. Now this is really important because what this allows you to do is control the beats per minute of the track that's playing. So beats per minute is literally the number of beats that happen per minute. And if you consider counting the music as being beats, so if I start playing, each beat on a 4x4 on the floor track like this, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Those are each beats. So this is literally the speed of the song or how many beats per minute. So faster songs are going to have a higher beats per minute, 1, 2, 3, 4, and slower songs, 1, 2, 3, 4 are going to be slower. Now, typically you will also be able to adjust the range of this tempo fader, and this will control basically where this minimum and maximum are. Typically 10% is really common, 8 to 12% you'll see on controllers, so it may go from plus or minus 10% to plus and minus 8%. So if it's 100 beats per minute, it would let you go from 90 to 110. And that's about 10% distance between the two is about the maximum distance you can do it without people noticing. Now, sometimes you want people to notice, sometimes you want to speed up a track or slow it down. But if you're playing a track, maybe 8% slower and you started and ended at that speed, most people probably won't be paying attention, and that's especially the case if they've had a lot of alcohol. So keep that in mind. What I tend to do is start the track, mix it in at a certain tempo, and then it's fine if I slowly throughout the night will creep up the tempo, or slowly throughout the song even, increase the tempo so then it's not as noticeable, it's not a huge jump. The next controls that I want to talk about are your EQ controls, and these are your low frequencies, so this is like your bass, your mid frequencies, and then your high frequencies, so this is like the top end. So the low is typically your bass and kick drum. The mids, this is going to be your vocals and some of your sort of instruments in the middle, like synths and things. And then your high frequencies, these are going to be typically hi-hats, the top end of vocals. And turning this to the left is going to turn it down. In the middle, it'll be the same, and turning it up to the right will actually boost it. So I'll show you what each of these knobs sound like, both turned down and increased. And what I'm going to do, I'll talk about this in a minute, but I'm going to set a loop so this track doesn't end while I'm controlling these. So that's cutting the bass. You often hear DJs do this. And you can double click these to reset them. And increasing this can increase the bass as well. Your mids. And then your highs. Now, one thing I would recommend when using these EQ controls is be very careful boosting anything. I pretty much keep these set to the middle the whole night. Now, some DJs like having a little bit of a high boost and a little bit of a low boost. That's fine if you like that sound, but the thing you want to be careful, especially with your low frequencies, is boosting this too much can actually clip your signal. You can overload it. You can end up destroying speakers and causing everything to sound like garbage very, very quickly. And if you destroy speakers at club sound system or something like that, very quickly that you show that you don't know what you're doing, and you could cost the club a lot of money. I mean, especially some of these sound systems, I've played at clubs that have sound systems that cost like millions of dollars. So be very careful. I find it better to just do this. There are a few songs that I know I need to boost the mids or the low end or the high end for this reason. But for the most part, it's like I know how the track is mixed. I know I need to do this, and I would much rather just remaster the track myself or just do it for those particular tracks, and every time that I'm not doing this, leave it this way. So once again, these are your EQ controls. The one that we're going to be using the most is this low frequency, because typically you don't want to be layering two kick drums or two low frequencies at once. That, once again, can cause clipping, and it can also just sound really, really bad. So we'll talk about that more as well later, but that is pretty standard as well. The last control I want to talk about down here is your loop control, and what this allows you to do is set a loop that will basically jump, or basically you can set a loop and it'll loop a certain section of the song. So this will control the size, this left and right arrow, and then clicking on it will actually enable the loop for that many beats. So this is in beats, and you can even have, quarters of a beat. So let me give you an example. So that is one way you can do this. Actually, I said that was going to be the last thing, but what you typically have in all your DJ controllers as well is a filter knob that I want to talk about as well. And this tends to be right underneath the EQ controls. I don't know why it's like this here, but that's just this layout. In these other layouts, you'll see the filter knob is going to be over here right below the EQ, which is more standard. Once again, I'm not sure why they moved it over here, but try to find that filter knob. It's usually the biggest twisty knob you can find on your controller. So try to find that. And what controllers have done recently is they've allowed you to basically map other effects beyond just the filter to these. But what this will do is kind of like your EQ controls, you can slowly sweep one way or another. Now turning it to the left, I guess this would be counterclockwise. What this will do is start by cutting out the high frequencies and only leaving the low ones. And you can do this gradually as you twist the knob. Turning it clockwise or to the right, what will happen is you're going to slowly take out the low frequencies until you're only left with the high ones. And this can be a really good effect when you're either mixing or you're basically trying to do something tricky, something kind of fun as you're playing the tracks. But one of the things that ends up happening, and the reason I tend not to use this as much with transitions instead of these controls, is this filter tends to have this peaky nature to it. This has to do with the way the signal processing is. I don't want to get into it in this video, but it tends to be a very, very obvious thing that you're doing, whereas these can be a little bit more subtle. So take a listen to this filter knob. This is to the left. And now I'm going to turn it to the right. Anyway, hope you found this video helpful. In the next video, what we're going to do is talk about tempo and phase.